Over in our Facebook group RKMD, one of our members, i.e. he asked the group, OnePlus Nord, yay or nay? And the response was almost overwhelmingly nay. Apparently, nobody likes this phone. So, I got curious lah. Decided, okay, let's try and use this phone and see what's what. So that's exactly what I've been doing. I've been using the OnePlus Nord for about a week now, and I gotta say, I'm having a lot of trouble finding fault with it. Now, I did come into this, a little bit of a skeptic because OnePlus was like, oh, we're going back to our true north. With the Snapdragon 765G? Yeah, sure. I was like absolutely not convinced, but because I'm a professional reviewer, I had to like, okay, cleanse my mind a little bit, cleanse my palate, had a bit of pickled radish and was like, come into this without any of these preconceived notions. And so I started using this. So this is the OnePlus Nord. It's the top spec model actually, with 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. And after a week with it, again, it's kind of hard for me to find fault with it because it does what you kind of need a smartphone to do. Not more than what you need a smartphone to do, but also not less. So let's start there. We'll start with, the specs. The most obvious first thing that you gotta see is the display. So this OnePlus Nord comes with a 6.44-inch Full HD Plus AMOLED display. It looks nice, it's vibrant, it has good colors, it's nice and contrasty, and yeah, okay, off-axis viewing is a little bit like it does shift a bit of colors, but not in any way that is unacceptable. And on top of that, pretty good resolution and good colors and all that, you also have a 90 Hz refresh rate, which is, for lack of a better word, refreshing. So fast refresh rates are always like really nice. I think a minimum of 90 is good enough for you to tell the difference between a 60 Hz, like a slow panel, and a 90 Hz fast panel. And everything is smooth. Swiping through menus, browsing through web pages, everything is like super buttery, and it sort of adds to that feeling of speed that you'd get with this smartphone. Some of you may not like that it has a punch hole, and the punch hole is pretty big because for some reason they decided, okay, we're gonna have two cameras up front. I know my colleague Najib does not like it because it's quite big. I'm personally not that bothered by it. I got used to it pretty quick, so the rest of the screen was like good enough for me, and the in-display fingerprint scanner, it's optical, but it's fast in true OnePlus fashion. Then the next thing that this smartphone got a lot of flack for was the performance. So inside you'll find a Snapdragon 765G processor, either 8 or 12 gigs of RAM, and a 128 or 256 gigs of internal storage. Now, yes, the Snapdragon 765 is not a flagship processor. Everybody knows that, and a lot of die-hard OnePlus fans are not very happy. But I have to say that, in my daily experience with this smartphone, the Snapdragon 765G feels good enough. It's not that, like, there is a bit of difference between it and like an 865 or an 865 Plus. It's just not quite as snappy, especially if you're launching like, heavier applications. But if you're gonna do all your other stuff like, web browsing and social media and stuff like that, I think that this processor is more than good enough. I didn't feel like it was a really experience. On top of that, it has that 90 Hz refresh rate, so it helps the whole smartphone feel snappy, and that's really good. But of course, if you are like some really heavy user, you want lots of gaming, you want like, I don't know, processor intensive tasks, then maybe the 765 won't be good enough for you. But I think for the vast majority of people who use the smartphone for, just their commuting, their social media, some photos and stuff like that, this is, performance-wise, I don't really have a complaint here. And of course, you know, OnePlus's sort of secret sauce, the thing that makes a OnePlus device so desirable to people like me is the software, and that makes a return here. So you get really, really nice Oxygen OS, the exact kind of experience that you'd want, you know, from one of their flagship devices. It's very near stock, but it comes with a bunch of useful features and apps. It's got plenty of customization, and it looks clean as it ever is. So I really like that about a OnePlus phone, and you know, for the longest time, that has been quite hard to find in sort of like the mid-range to premium mid-range category. The one thing I was a little bit skeptical coming in was the battery life. So this smartphone comes with a 4100 milliamp hour battery, and yeah, that's probably big by 2018, 2019 standards, but today, you know, smartphones with 4500 milliamp hour batteries and above, you know, they're really common now. So seeing this kind of cell in this phone, I was a little bit worried, but using it, I was actually quite surprised. So I had the screen on 90 Hz the entire time, and battery life was good. I could easily get through an entire day of, like, I would say mixed usage for this MCO period. So lots of video, some photography, lots of social media and stuff like that. I was able to get through with about 5 hours of screen on time at the end of the day, and sometimes I'd end the day with like 30, maybe even 40% of the battery still left. And my day is like 17 hours. So I would say that battery life here is good for now. On top of that, it also has, like, you know, the Warp Charge 30T super fast charging, but with battery life this good, I never really had to rely on that. So overall, you know, I'm pretty happy with it. The other thing that I wasn't sure about, that I was actually very skeptical about, was the device's build, because this isn't like a glass and metal phone. Yes, the back's glass, the front's glass, but the frame is actually made of plastic. Even though it looks like metal in photos, it is very much plastic, and you can definitely tell. So I was thinking like it would make the phone feel like really cheap and like very fragile and flimsy, but I'm actually quite happy with the build. Like, it doesn't feel too bad. Like, you can see some warping along the edges because it's plastic, right? And you know, the ports don't look nearly as clean as if they were like on a metal device. But as far as like rigidity goes and like the heft, I'm actually okay with the build. It feels more premium than I thought that it would, so I'm gonna give it a plus for that. I don't think a lot of people will like the fact that this phone doesn't have a 3.5mm headphone jack. I was a little bit bummed to find that, but you know, that's like pretty common nowadays. And also, OnePlus did give me a pretty nice speaker. Even though it's a mono speaker setup, it's loud, it's got a lot of volume, and that to me is like the most important thing when it comes to smartphone speakers, because if I can't hear it, you know, it doesn't matter how good it sounds. So far, I like quite a lot about the OnePlus Nord, but it does fall into a trap that a lot of actual premium mid-range smartphones or even mid-range smartphones tend to do, and that's the camera. So on paper, it looks nice. It's got a quad camera system. Wow. But then you actually look at the cameras and you're like, what? It's got a 48 megapixel main sensor, pretty good. That looks like it came straight out of the OnePlus 8, which is, you know, that makes the camera actually pretty serviceable. I would say in good lighting, you can take, okay, good enough shots for social media and stuff like that, or like, you know, to send like, oh, is this the brand that I'm supposed to buy? Yeah, it's gonna be good enough for that. But then you look at the other cameras and you're like, what on earth is going on? It's got an 8 megapixel ultra wide. The quality is quite far from the 48 megapixel camera. You've got a 5 megapixel depth camera, which I guess it's supposed to help for portrait shots, but I don't really have a way of proving that. And you've got a 2 megapixel macro camera. That's a 2 megapixel macro camera. Just forget about it. It does, however, come with Nightscape, which is OnePlus's night mode software thing, which does like a pretty good job at taking low light photos. But overall, the camera, the rear camera, I would say is serviceable, but not particularly excellent, or not nearly as good as their ads seem to claim. And the same, you know, I think the same can be said for the selfie camera. I like that they went with a dual camera setup. I like that there's a 32 megapixel main selfie camera and an ultra wide one, because the ultra wide one is really useful for group selfies. But honestly, the image quality is just like, it leaves a lot to be desired. Now, I know at the beginning of this video I said, you know, I was having trouble finding fault with the device, but there are one or two things that I'm not a huge fan of for this smartphone, even at this price point. Number one, I would have loved to see water resistance. Like, some kind of water resistance would have been friggin' excellent. They could even get a bucket. No, actually, no, that's not good enough. But some kind of IP rating would have been really nice to sort of give this smartphone an edge over the competition. And the other thing is, now maybe it's because I got like a pretty boring color, maybe it looks nicer in blue, but as far as the design goes, it's not very inspiring. It doesn't really look like a OnePlus device to me. It looks like every other sort of premium mid-range or cheap mid-range smartphone. In fact, even looks, if you ask me, it looks a bit like a Realme smartphone. And yeah, that's like kind of like, So if we were to come back to the question that sort of started my whole journey into this smartphone, OnePlus Nord, yay or nay, there's been a lot that, you know, makes me lean towards the yay camp. It's a pretty good smartphone. Like it's kind of hard to find fault unless you're really like just this specs sheet kind of person. Then maybe you won't like it. But I think for the most part, it's a pretty good phone. So why don't people like it? Well, that has to do with every Malaysian's favorite measuring stick, and that's the price. Now, I will admit that the top spec model, the one that I reviewed, the one with 12 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of storage, that device is priced at a ridiculous price. It's 2,399 ringgit. And yes, you do get a pair of OnePlus Buds for free, but the price gap between it and the base model is so ridiculous, you know, that it feels like they're kind of just charging you for the headphones anyway, and I don't want that. Like, I just want more storage. Can I just have more storage? So no, that device, I agree, completely overpriced. But the base model, well, that's priced at 1,799 ringgit, that's a little bit harder to hate. To understand that, we have to look at the competition. So some of the phones that were mentioned in that comment or in that question thread was two devices, okay? You've got the Poco F2 Pro and you've got the Xiaomi Mi 10. Now those two are excellent devices, but let's look at them individually. So if we look at the Poco F2 Pro, that device has a retail price tag of 2,199 ringgit. But right now it's on discount, so you can get it for 1,799 ringgit, and before this, like before we shot this video, actually, it went on sale for like 1,500 ringgit. So that is a ridiculous price. So if we were to look at the specs on the Poco F2 Pro, it seems like a really good deal, right? Okay, for starters, it has a Snapdragon 865, which is, you know, this just kicks this phone's butt. And then it's also got a bigger battery, it's got faster UFS 3.1 storage, and it's also got a headphone jack. Those are all awesome things. But the OnePlus does edge it out in the screen because the OnePlus has a fast refresh rate screen, 90 Hz. And to me, that is a big win. I know maybe some of you don't like it, but if you've ever used it, I think you will appreciate the faster refresh rate. And then we've got the Mi 10. So the Mi 10 is a proper flagship. It feels premium as f. It looks good. It's got a dual curved AMOLED display, 6.67 inches. Also 90 Hz, so you know it's got the OnePlus Beat even there. It's got stereo speakers. It's got a way nicer sort of build and look to it. It's also got faster storage. It's also got a bigger battery, and it's got wireless charging, which is not something the OnePlus Nord has. So it has like a lot of nice flagship features that you want, but for me the downside there is that it's running MIUI. I'm not a big fan of MIUI. I know the jury's split on this, but personally I take Oxygen any day of the week. But here's the thing, this smartphone retails for 2,799 ringgit, like that's the retail price. But you know, for a while there, it was on sale for 1,999 ringgit, which means it's only 200 ringgit more expensive than the base model. And that also makes it a really good deal. Now though, you can get it for like 2,399 ringgit, which to me makes the question a little bit more difficult. But do all of those features mean that either of those smartphones are a better buy than the OnePlus Nord? Here's what I think. If you can get the Poco F2 Pro for less money than the OnePlus Nord, that means less than 1,799 ringgit, I think that you should go for it because that's a great deal. But if it is more expensive than the Nord, then I still would pick the Nord because I like the 90 Hz screen, and I think Oxygen OS is just so much better of an experience. And the rest of the smartphone, I would say, is like maybe 80% of the Poco F2 Pro, which means it's good enough for me. If you can get the Xiaomi Mi 10 for less than 2,000 ringgit, then yeah, I think you should go for that because I think that that's a great deal. But if it's more than 2,000 ringgit, if it's like 2,300, 2,400, 2,500, then I would still pick the OnePlus Nord because then, you know, that price gap is a lot bigger now. And I think for the most part, this should be, again, good enough for most people. Okay, so to wrap this video up then, I see a lot of people saying that the OnePlus Nord is OnePlus going back to their roots, returning to their true north. But having used the OnePlus Nord, I have to disagree, because if anything, it feels more like they've left the thing that they started with. Because when I think of the OnePlus Genesis phone, like the first device that they ever did, which is the OnePlus One, it was OnePlus saying like, okay, here's the deal. We're not going to give you any of those like excess features, but in return, we're going to give you the best performance possible. We're going to give you like super awesome flagship processor at an affordable price. So it didn't matter to OnePlus fans whether the OnePlus One actually had like a kind of crap body, it had battery, it had a camera. It didn't matter, because at its core, it had the heart of a hero, and that won a lot of people over. That won me over. I bought one myself. And using the Nord, it's almost like the complete opposite of that. It's almost like OnePlus is saying, it's almost like OnePlus was saying, okay, maybe giving you like the best processor isn't the best anymore, so we're gonna dial that back a little bit. We'll give you like a mid-range processor, but in return, you're gonna get like this awesome fast refresh rate screen. You're gonna get super fast charging, and you're gonna get like a better camera. So no, I don't think that the Nord is like OnePlus returning to their roots, or like going on the course that they set out with. In fact, I think it's like the complete opposite. But to say that they made a mistake with making this phone is also not something that I'd agree with, because if I look at it as a whole, it's a pretty good device, and I think for its price, and if it does get a discount in the future, it will be pretty hard to match. But those are my thoughts, and that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any thoughts, if you disagree, feel free to leave them in the comments below. You can also join RKMD and argue with me there. I try to reply there as often as I can. Yeah, so those are all my thoughts about the OnePlus Nord. I like it. Let me know what you think. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can like us on Facebook. You can join RKMD. But our home on the internet will always be at soyachinchao.com. I'm Rory. Until next video, I will see you then.